Hi guys, and welcome back to a new video. In today's video, I will go through all the different professions for the War Within and I will rank them based on their potential for gold making. So keep in mind, this video is based on all the information that we have so far from the beta, so maybe some of these things will change when the game will be released, but most likely it will remain pretty similar to what we have right now. Just before I start diving into the list, I just want to insist on a few things. The first one is the fact that all the different professions are very similar to what we had in Dragonflight. So if there was something that worked very well for you, most likely it will still work in the War Within. Also, keep in mind, of course, some of these different professions will be, for instance, really good at the start of the expansion and then maybe not so good a few months after the launch. So some of them you should really try to prioritize them when they're good, and then you have other professions that will probably be better on the long term. So it really depends how you want to make some gold and what is your strategy. Also, right now, and this is again very similar to what happened in Dragonflight, two main ways to make some gold, either through the crafting order system or through the auction house. And so here it's really up to you to see what you prefer. If you're someone who is not a big fan of crafting orders, then you should avoid all the different professions and especially the specializations that will require you to actually engage a lot with the system. Or if you're someone who doesn't really like, especially the region-wide auction house, then you should again try to focus on something else. So really something important to remember. Okay, so let's start with our first profession on this list, and it's Inscription. So with Inscription, again, you're going to be able to do all the different things you were already able to do back in Dragonflight. So with that, it means you will, for instance, be able to craft all the different profession treaties that are really good. Also the different PvP trinkets, as well as some of the new weapons for PvP again, which are really good items because as you can see, they will increase your eye level in arenas and battleground to 606. So again, at the start of the expansion, these different items are going to sell very well. Then you have the Ventus rune for the Nerub R Palace, and you will have the same for all the other raids from the War Within. Next to that, you also have a bunch of profession equipments, which are really good, and especially when you maxed up these different equipments through the crafting orders, you will be able to probably make quite a lot of gold when answering these different orders. Then you have all the different missives that again are necessary for most of the different crafts, and so these type of items always sell. Of course, keep in mind these are region wide, and so many times these are not too expensive on the auction house, but you can still manage to make some decent profit, especially at the start of the expansion. So then you have all the other missives right here. And you also have the contracts. So the contracts are really good, especially if you are among some of the first people on your realm to unlock these different contracts, then most likely you will be able to make a little bit of gold with it. And these different items remain pretty good throughout the entire expansion. So again, I think these different contracts are another good thing for Inscription. Then you have the different weapons. So here again, you have a few BOE weapons. These are not the PvP ones. These are the normal blue ones, and you will be able to craft them very early on. And then you have the ones that are epic and that you will need to craft through the crafting order system. Then next to that, of course, we have all the different Dark Moon cards and the Dark Moon decks and also Dark Moon sigils. So here, the only difference with Dragonflight is that at least right now, you can't directly craft these different Darkmoon cards. You can only transcribe them. So in order to transcribe them, you need to have already the other cards, and then you can transcribe them for the special deck that you want. But I still think this is something that is worth considering because, again, here, for instance, if some of them are very cheap, but the other decks are way more expensive, you can transcribe them and probably make a lot of profit by just doing that. Same, of course, you will be able to craft the different Darkmoon sigils that will be required in order to then upgrade your different Darkmoon decks. These different items are really good, very powerful, and things that at the start of an expansion are always really good. So these different sigils right here, for instance, will definitely be in high demand. So I would say this is still an interesting part of Inscription, but if you can't actually craft these different Darkmoon cards, then it's not going to be as profitable as it was in Dragonflight. Next to that, you also, of course, have the different inks and also these different items right here that will allow you to then craft over interesting items with over professions. So these are always needed and things that will sell really well on the auction house. Now, in terms of specializations for Inscription, of course, it's going to depend on the type of items you want to craft and make some gold with, but there are a few that are really interesting. So here, for instance, the first thing I would recommend you to do is really try and unlock some of these main stats. So for instance, if you want to craft some of the really good gear that you will then be able to craft through the crafting order, I would recommend you to try and get Eureka in order to get a lot of ingenuity. If you are trying to craft a lot of inks and all these other items that you can then sell on the auction house, and remember, it's region wide, you should try to get, for instance, multi-craft and resourcefulness, because like that you will be able to craft them at a lower cost than all the different people in your region. Then next to that, I would say that again, if you're planning to just craft a bunch of inks and everything, of course, having these type of things here unlocked is going to be very important. But again, keep in mind, you are competing with people from your entire region. And most of the time, after just maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, you won't make that much profit by just crafting and selling all these different materials. Because again, it's going to be very, very competitive. Another thing that, in my opinion, is interesting is actually trying to prioritize all the different profession equipments, because again, these are really, really important and they will be in high demand. And if you are able to craft them with the highest quality, you will be able to make quite a lot of gold. But again, it's something you will only be able to really do through the crafting order system. You can always sell the lower versions on the auction house, but for the higher ones, you will need to do it through the crafting order system. Same as I mentioned, you have the different staves, torch. So these are some of the weapons you can craft here. I wouldn't say there's going to have like this high of a demand. But again, if you are into crafting orders, then that might be a good category. Again, I wouldn't really recommend you going there. And then finally, you have the archival additions. So here, this is again really, really good because you have the different contracts, the missives, and the Ventus runes. Of course, you need to unlock the different patterns and all the different recipes by doing different type of things, but you will then be able to craft them way easier and with better quality. And finally, you have the different Dark Moon sigils. So here, if you want to try and make some gold with these different sigils, you can unlock all these different ranks right here. In my opinion, this is maybe not the best choice because again, if you can't craft these different Dark Moon cards, then it will only leave you really with these different sigils and of course, with the ability to transcribe all the different Dark Moon cards and have better chances to get more of them. But still, it's not going to be as profitable as it was in Dragonflight. So that's my opinion. I would really recommend you to first focus on these ones, and depending on what you want to craft, either Eureka or the detail-oriented and multitasking. And then you can see what type of items you really want to prioritize and make some gold with. So now when it comes to ranking Inscription, in my opinion, I'm not going to rank it really high because even though you can make some gold with this profession, compared to Dragonflight, if you cannot craft the different Dark Moon cards, it's not going to be as good. And even in Dragonflight, Inscription wasn't really the best profession in order to make a lot of gold. It might be good at the start of the expansion, but really quickly, most of the items you will be able to craft will become cheap and you won't be able to make a lot of profit. There's maybe just a little bit of hope with some of the sigils and maybe some of the different profession equipments and things you can craft through the crafting order system. But again, it's not as good as some of the other professions. So for me, I would put Inscription as a C. Again, probably at the start of the expansion, it might be more of a B. But if we're talking about the entire expansion and what you can do throughout this expansion, I would put Inscription as a C. Okay, let's now talk about Enchanting. So Enchanting, again, is very similar to what you had in the Dragon House. You will basically be able to craft all the different enchants for all your different pieces of gear. There is an interesting addition to some of the different items you can craft, and these are all the different Gleeful Glamour. So basically, these items will allow you to change appearance and take the appearance of another race. And as you can see, this is something you will be able to use for any of the different normal races and also allied races. So I think these different items might become quite popular, but they're not going to be the things you will be able to make millions of gold with. Still, it's a nice addition. One downside, in my opinion, is the fact that we don't have the different illusions for the weapon enchants. And this is something that a lot of people were making a lot of gold, including myself, in Dragonflight. And here we don't really have them. So sadly, this is one thing that I really wanted to highlight because again, it was a big gold maker for me, at least in Dragonflight. So next to that, we have, of course, like a few weapons. So we have this one and this one right here. We also have these different items right here. So some of the different profession equipments. And then really, we just have all the different enchants. So here again, we don't really have a lot of changes. And the final thing that, of course, is important to mention are the different enchanted crests. So the different crests are always something that will also sell, but keep in mind, again, you need to get them through the crafting order system. And so it might not be the best scenario if you're not a big fan of this system overall. So in terms of the different specializations here, if you are trying to make some gold with the different enchants, and it's definitely going to be the main way to make some gold with enchanting, I would recommend you to try as soon as possible to take ingenuity because again, the ones that will sell for the most gold are the different enchants that will have the higher quality. And so with ingenuity, you will be able hopefully to get more of these higher quality enchants. Then, of course, you also have, for instance, resourcefulness that can be interesting, but I would recommend you to try and really focus Immaculate Ingenuity. Then after that, if you are trying to target specific enchants, you should go in Everlasting Enchantments and really try to target specific items you can create these different enchants for. So for instance, here, as you can see, you will be able to craft this one, and then you will be able to make some gold with this one. It's a little bit early to say which items and which enchants will become the most profitable, but really keep that in mind. You can unlock specific ones in order to really try and make the most gold with these different enchants. Then next to that, you have the different, of course, Glyphal, Glamour, for instance, as I mentioned. So here, if you want to make some gold with these items, you can go in the ephemeral enrichments and equipment. And here you will be able to unlock all of them by completing these three right here. So again, I think at the start of the expansion, it might be interesting to start and craft some of them. But very quickly, I feel these items are not going to be super, super expensive. And so it might be a little bit tricky to put a lot of points with these different Glyphal Glamours. But it's really up to you to see what you want to do. Then next to that, you have all the different items you can craft. So you have the profession equipment, you have the one here again, I would not recommend you to really spend too much. This one might be interesting because again, profession equipments are good, but again, you will have to spend quite a lot of points in order for you to just have this one maxed up. And so I would not really recommend you to do that. And then the last thing that I want to mention and highlight is the fact that you can also improve the way you disenchant. And again, this is a big part of enchanting. So here, as you can see, you will be able to unlock, for instance, the way you disenchant uncommon equipment. Then you have a rare equipment. And finally, you also have epic equipment. So this could be a good strategy because like that, you will be able to get way more things when disenchanting items. And especially if you're planning, for instance, to do some hyper spawn farms and things like that, then that might be a really good way to make a lot of gold because you will be able to send all the different green, blue, epic items you receive to your enchanter. And then like that, you will be able to get even more of the different materials when disenchanting all these items. So this is something that in my opinion can also be very interesting. So my suggestion will be to really go with ingenuity and then after that maybe resourcefulness and maybe multi-craft and to really try and target some of the best enchants that you can craft for each of the different pieces of gear. And then why not also considering doing these different ones right here in order to really become powerful when disenchanting. And finally, this one is a little more random and a little more risky but can also be very profitable. It's the different Glyphal Glamours and then this profession equipment. So I would probably rank Enchanting as a low A or high B simply because this is a very interesting profession. You can really make a lot of gold with all these different enchants, and especially you can sell all these different enchants on the auction house. But remember, all these different enchants are region wide, and so it means that you will need to be extremely competitive in order to actually make a lot of profit with this profession. So you will need to be able to craft these enchants at a very low cost and also to craft the higher quality in order to make some gold. So still in Dragonflight, a lot of people have been able to make millions and millions and millions of gold for quite a long time with enchanting. And so I still think if you put the effort in and you're really focusing on this specific profession, you should be able to make a lot of gold, but it will require quite a lot of work in order to make it really profitable. So again, I think for me it's a low A, but it could also be a high B. So after that, we're gonna have blacksmithing. So here, this is a profession that can be interesting, but you really need to enjoy crafting orders because most of the different items you will be able to craft will be binds when picked up, and you will need to then craft them through the crafting order system. So here, as usual, we have all the different plate gear that is pretty good. We have the epic version, which is BOP, and the blue version, which is BOE. Again, all the different BOE items can be interesting at the start of the expansion, but very quickly, these will become very cheap. Then next to that, we have all the different epic weapons. So again, these different weapons are really good and probably what you can make the most gold with through the different crafting orders. And then you also have the blue version of these different weapons, which again will still sell, but not for a lot of profit, probably after just a few weeks. Then we also have some embellished gear. So you have these different weapons and also gear right here, which has specific powers. So again, this can be interesting to craft, but you will first need to get your hands on the recipe and then you will actually be able to start crafting them. Then we have all the different profession equipment. So here again, this profession is really good for profession equipments because we have a lot of them. And when you can maximize these and craft them with the highest quality, you will be able to make a lot of gold, but it will take a little bit of time. Next to that, we also have these different items right here. So these are the different items you can sell on the auction house, and these are region wide. And so it will allow you, for instance, as you can see, to sharpen your mining herbalism or skinning tool. Same, you have these ones right here, for instance. And you also have the different keys and the hammer. So these ones are not really things that you're going to make any gold with. The only other thing that I really want to insist on, and it makes this profession, in my opinion, more interesting than in Dragonflight, is the fact that now we have a lot of different PvP weapons that you will be able to craft and sell on the auction house. Back in Dragonflight, you only had the different pieces of gear, but you didn't have all these different weapons. And so now it means that probably a lot of people are going to buy these different weapons in order to have a really good high level in PvP and arenas. And as you can imagine, with this profession, you will be able to craft most of them. So I think this is definitely going to be a really good way to make a lot of gold for the different people having this profession. And again, all these different weapons are through the auction house, they are BOEs and they're not region wide. So if you are amongst the first few people being able to craft these different items, you will most likely make a lot of gold. And the last thing that I forgot to mention is, of course, the fact that you also have the different alloys. And these are actually going to be really, really good because these are very important crafting reagents for a lot of different crafts. And so things that you can probably make a lot of gold if you decide to really maximize them and have the highest quality and the most efficient craft possible. So when it comes to the different specialization, my main suggestion here would be for you to go with weaponsmith and really try to be able and craft these different weapons with the highest quality, because then you will be able to make a lot of gold through the crafting orders and of course also through the auction house with the different green PvP weapons. So this is what I think is one of the best way to make some gold with this profession in the War Within. But it really depends again on whether you enjoy or not crafting orders. If you are not a big fan of crafting orders, then I would recommend you to try and really prioritize all the different alloys, because these are going to be in high demand and you will be able to make a lot of gold if again you can craft them with the least resources necessary and with the highest quality. So here, for instance, as you can see, you will be able to then craft all the specific alloys, such as, for instance, the sanctified alloy, and you have the other one as well. And so I would recommend you to try and do that if, again, you're not a big fan of the crafting order system. Next to that, of course, you have a lot of other interesting items, such as, for instance, the different here frameworks. So you will be able to start crafting these different items as well, which again are going to be in high demand because you will be able to use them in order to add sockets to some of your items. And then one thing that you can do, of course, is to try and increase, for instance, the ingenuity for these different crafts, and especially the resourcefulness and the multi-craft for the different alloys. So if you are trying to go into, for instance, weaponsmithing or armor smithing, I would recommend you to try and again increase your ingenuity to get the highest quality. And if you're trying to go with the alloys and all these other items, such as, for instance, the frameworks, then I would recommend you to maybe try and focus really on resourcefulness and multi-craft, but ingenuity is also going to be very, very good. So for me, blacksmithing again is a profession that can be interesting, but it will always be a B because of the new system and because of the fact that most of the really interesting items you can craft are BOP and you need to go through the crafting order system. Personally, I'm really not a big fan of the system, but also this is very time consuming, and sadly you will need to spend a lot of time to become one of the best on your realm and to then make some gold. And keep in mind, sadly, if you are playing on a realm that is low pop or medium pop realm, most of the time you won't be able to find that many people who are asking for some of these different orders. And so it might still become a little bit difficult to actually make some gold with blacksmithing. After that, we have leatherworking. So in my opinion, leatherworking is very, very similar to blacksmithing. So here you will be able to craft both the mail and leather armor. So this is the main difference. So here again, I would say in order for you to make a lot of gold, you will need to like and enjoy the crafting orders because all the different really good gear, such as, for instance, all the different epic mail and leather armor pieces will be BOP. Still, next to all these, you will have quite a lot of things you can craft as well. So first, you have all the different green PvP items for both mail and leather. So here, early on in the expansion, you will be able to probably make quite a lot of gold with these items, especially if you are one of the only ones crafting them on your realm at that point. You also have, of course, all the different professional equipments. Again, here, all the different ones you can sell on the auction house directly will still be profitable during the first few weeks, but then you will need to move to the crafting orders in order to really sell the ones that have a really high quality. And so you will still need to go through this new system. Then after that, you have a few more interesting BOE items. So for instance, you have the different armor kits. These are always things that sell, and most likely, again, you will be able to make a little bit of gold with it. You also have the different drums. Again, the drums are things at the start of the expansion that can make a lot of gold, but then later on, usually it's very hard to make a big profit with them. Then you have all the different heights. So here, again, these are some of the BOE items that you can make some gold with because depending on what you choose to prioritize, you will be able to make a lot of gold by crafting these different heights. And then, of course, next to that, you have all the different pieces of gear, including the ones that are a little bit rarer, such as the Arati, Nerubian, and Bestial patterns, as you can see right here. So for the specializations, again, it's very similar to blacksmithing. So if, for instance, you want to craft all the different epic BOP items, then you can choose either leather or mail. I would say probably leather is best because you cover most classes, but it's going to be very similar. If you are deciding to go that route, then I would recommend you to choose this one right here, commanding concentration, because you will be able to get more ingenuity, and again, you will be able to craft some better quality equipments. But if you're more into crafting BOE items, then I would recommend you to go here in Flawless Portus and maybe to consider taking Spotless Stitching, because as you can see, you will be able to craft the different armor kits a little bit easier. Same with some of the other BOE items. Here you also have the different professional equipment, so again, that could be a good strategy. And if you are considering crafting all these different armor kits and BOE items that you can sell on the auction house, then I would recommend you to try and take multi-craft and also resourcefulness. Again, it really depends what you're trying to do. For instance, for some of the professional equipments, then it would be ingenuity that will be really, really good. It's up to you to see what type of items you want to craft in priority. But so for leatherworking, in my opinion, it's going to be very similar to blacksmithing. It's a little bit not as good, especially because, again, the weapons I think are just more interesting in general. So I'm going to put it as a low B tier, and I think it's pretty fair for this profession. After that, let's talk about herbalism. So herbalism is one of the different gathering professions, and here it's very, very similar to the Dragonflight expansion. One thing that is very important to keep in mind with gathering professions is the fact that now they're mainly region-wide, so it means that you will need to be pretty competitive in order to actually make some profits. So of course, herbalism, same as mining and skinning, is going to be pretty good, especially at the start of the expansion, because these different materials are going to be in high demand and people won't have had the time by then to actually farm tons and tons of them. So it might be a good thing to consider if you are someone who just enjoys doing a little bit of gathering and directly selling the items, and they usually sell in a few seconds. But of course, remember, after probably a few weeks, maybe 1 month, these different gathering professions are not going to be as interesting. You will still be able to do a little bit of profit, but compared to some of the other crafting professions, in my opinion, it's not going to be as good. So maybe something worth considering for the start of the expansion. And of course, I would always recommend you to combine mining and herbalism, because these are, in my opinion, the two best gathering professions. So now in terms of the different specialization for herbalism, the first thing I would recommend you to do is to really get botany, because when you complete all the different ranks, you will be able to then gather herbs while being mounted, which is probably going to be the most important thing for you. Then after that, there are a few interesting things. So for instance, I would recommend you to maybe try to get the spore fuse, because when you complete all 40 points, you will be able to see camouflage herbs. And so this is something that I think will be pretty good, especially if you're playing on a hyperrealm where there's a lot of competition. You have other interesting ones that you can try and of course unlock. But this one in particular, I think is going to be very interesting. And then you have the bountiful harvest, of course. So here it's really depending on what herb is selling for the best and for the most expensive price. Then you can focus on this one and you will be able to basically gather these different plants and get more of them when gathering them. So it will depend on, again, which one will be in high demand and the most expensive ones. So you might want to wait a little bit before unlocking these ones. But really the first thing you should do is unlocking botany. Now, in terms of the ranking for herbalism, in my opinion, it's going to be a high C tier, simply because, again, this is a gathering profession. And even though at the start of the expansion, it can be profitable, very quickly, you won't be able to make a lot of gold. And as most of these different items are region wide, it means that you will have to compete with a lot of people, a lot of bots, and a lot of things like that. And sadly, after just a few weeks, it's not going to be super profitable. It's still a really good way to make some steady gold, because you know these will sell fast and you know you won't really have to struggle again with the auction house and all of that. You can just post them and they will sell. But the ratio of gold you can make per hour is not going to be as good as some of these other professions. So after that, we have mining. Mining is very similar to herbalism. This is another gathering profession. So it means that everything you will obtain through the profession will be region-wide. So of course, all the different items will sell very fast, but of course also it will be very competitive. And most likely after a few weeks, these different items will become a little bit cheaper. So it might not be the most profitable one. Though what you can do here is, again, focus first on mining fundamentals, because when you unlock all these different ranks, you will be able to start mining while being mounted. And so if you have herbalism with you as well, you will be able to do both of them at the same time. And then, especially again during the first few weeks, it might become very profitable for you to do it that way. So I would recommend you to first really try and do that. Then after that, you have like different type of things you can unlock. Again, you will be able to see some of the different camouflaged mining ore, and then you will also be able to gather more easily some of these different specific ore deposits and things like that. Again, it's really up to you to see which ones are going to be the most profitable and to then decide which of these specialization traits to unlock. But again, here for mining, it's one of these gathering professions, and it's going to be, for me, similar to herbalism, maybe a little bit less good. So in between herbalism and inscription. So after that, we have skinning. So skinning is again a gathering profession. And in my opinion, it's a little bit less interesting or profitable than herbalism and mining. but you can still make a decent amount of gold, especially at the start of the expansion. So here I would recommend you to maybe try and first focus on harvesting, because this is, in my opinion, what's going to be the most interesting and most important traits to unlock. Then after that, in my opinion, luring can be really interesting as well, because as you can see, you will be able to then basically summon these rare creatures that you will then be able to skin, and you will be able to then sell these rare materials on the auction house. So this is something that was, for instance, profitable during some of the different patches of Dragonflight, and I think it can still be interesting in the War Within. Then after that, it's a little bit difficult for me to tell you because I'm never really playing skinning, so I don't have a lot of knowledge on this specific profession, but these are my main recommendations. In terms of how I would rank it, it's going to be very similar, and I will put it as a C, simply because, again, it's, in my opinion, not as interesting as herbalism and mining, and as this is a gathering profession, a lot of the different items you will be able to get will only be very profitable at the start of the expansion, but later on they will become very competitive and most likely not as expensive. So after that, we have engineering. And engineering, in my opinion, is the profession that got the most upgrades in the War Within. So here, of course, you will be able to craft all the different items that were available in the War Within Dragonflight. So for instance, you have the different embellishments, you have some of the other gadgets, some of the different explosives and other devices. But then next to that, you have some very, very interesting items. So the first category is, of course, all the different profession equipments. Here it's similar to Dragonflight, but again, these items can become profitable. Next to that, you also have all the different gear and weapons. Again, here, nothing changes. The only major change is the fact that you can also craft now some of the different bracers, and you will be able to add one of the Tinker socket on it. And as you can see, you will be able to craft different type of these Tinker modules. And so I do think this is something that is pretty interesting. Then in terms of equipments, another very interesting change is the fact that you will also be able to craft some weapons for the different green PvP BOEs, such as for instance the rifle right here, and also some of the different wrist items that I mentioned before. And so again, for PvP, this might become very, very interesting. So already in terms of gear, engineering is getting some new cool items. And then there is also a few new toys. So again, here, always something worth considering in order to make some gold. Now, the main change is, of course, the new mounts that you will be able to craft. And this is something that we haven't been able to do for quite some time. And here, I really do think that you will be able to make some gold with this mount if you manage to craft it at a very low cost. So basically for this mount, you will need to get all these different items right here, and you will be able to buy them from a vendor. And in total, I believe it will cost you around 3 million gold, but you will also be able to choose different specialization traits in order to then get some of these different items and to reduce the cost of craft. But definitely this is something that will become very profitable, especially at the start of the expansion. So here in terms of specializations, what I would really recommend you to do is to go in inventing. First unlock inventing right here and then unlock parts, because as you can see, when you do that, you will then be able to get some of the different parts in order to craft the Crowd Promoter 230 when powered through parts. And so again, this is in my opinion the first thing you should really do, because the mount is probably going to be a really good source of gold at the start of the expansion and also throughout the expansion in general. So then next two parts, I would also recommend you really to get the Scrapper one unlocked, because here you will unlock some resourcefulness, and so it can be very useful because you might save some of the different parts in order to craft the mount, so something very useful. Then you also have all the different cogwheel that can be really good as well. And then in engineered equipment, you have, of course, the profession gear and then the gun. But remember here for the gun, for instance, you will need to go mainly through the crafting order system. So it depends on you and whether you like the system or not. But overall, engineering is going to be good. All these different traits and specializations can be interesting, even though the inventing one is, in my opinion, the most interesting one. So for me, engineering really has the whole package and is probably going to be one of the best, at least at the beginning, but also throughout the expansion. And for that reason, I'm going to put it as an S tier. So after that, we have Jewelcrafting. Jewelcrafting was a very profitable profession in Dragonflight, and it was mainly due to the fact that you were able to craft some very powerful rings and also amulets. So here it's going to be the same. As you can see, you will still be able to craft some of them. One important thing to remember is the fact that these will be rare drops from world creatures. And so if you have done the elemental area experience, you know that it's not something easy to get your hands on, and you will have to invest a lot of gold in order to then be able to craft these different pieces of gear. But still, jewelcrafting is a really good profession because it offers you a good compromise between both the different BOE items you can sell on the auction house and the different BOP items you can craft through the crafting order system. So here again, you will have some of these new different BOP rings and amulets, which I think is pretty good. Next to that, you of course also have the different ones for PvP. So these are things that I made a lot of gold with in Dragonflight, and I'm sure it will be the same in the War Within. Next to that, you have all the different profession equipments. As always, this is a good way to also make some additional gold. You also have 2 toys. These are not going to be the most profitable, but still a good source of gold from time to time. Now, the things that I think are going to be very interesting, of course, include all the different prisms and all the different gems, because these things are going to be very important in the War Within. And especially one interesting change, the fact that we are getting some that are only for PvP. So here it means that a lot of people who are doing PvP will most likely need these different gems, and so it will create an overmarket that will be specific for that. So in my opinion, I think Jewelcrafting is also getting some pretty good updates, but it's still very, very similar to what we had in Dragonflight. So when it comes to the different specializations here, maybe consider taking Jewelcrafting and especially the rings or the necklace, depending on which item is the most OP, because this is really how a lot of people were able to make a lot of gold back in Dragonflight. Again, you will need to get your hands on the different formulas and this type of things and designs, but still this is a good way to make a lot of gold if you are into the crafting order system and into these different type of items. Next to that, what you can of course do as well is try as much as possible to focus on some of these over gems, because this is something that can always make you a lot of gold. So here, as you can see, you will be able to really specialize yourself in some of these different type of gems. And then like that, you will be able, hopefully, to become very competitive. Remember, these will be region-wide, and so you will have to be very, very specific in some of them in order to be able to make some profit with them. And finally, shaping can also be interesting, because here, basically, when you're prospecting, you will be able to get even more of these different gems and things like that. And so, again, depending on how you want to make some gold with Jewelcrafting, this can also be a pretty good way and pretty decent way to make some gold. So overall, for me, Jewelcrafting is a pretty strong and solid profession. And for this reason, I will put it probably as an A tier. It's going to depend a lot on if we are having, again, some of these very powerful rings and necklaces, same as in Dragonflight, but still it's going to be a pretty solid profession, in my opinion. After that, we have tailoring. So tailoring is also getting some pretty good upgrades in the War Within. And the first thing that I really want to mention is, of course, all the new bags that you will be able to craft and that will be specific to each profession. So here, for instance, as you can see with this one in Alchemy, you will be able to increase the chance Algari experimentations discover a new recipe by 1%. Same here, for instance, for the Dark Moon Duffel. Transcribing a Cascarar Dark Moon card has a 5% chance to create another one. So for instance, if you are intending to make some gold with the Dark Moon cards, then you need to have this bag. And all these different bags will be BOEs and things that you will then be able to buy and sell on the auction house. And some of them are not completely specific to some of the different professions. So really trust me, you will be able to make a lot of gold with these different bags. One thing that is very interesting to note is the fact that you will need to buy them from a specific vendor, and it will require you quite a lot of different currencies and materials. And so what I would recommend you to do is, if you are planning to create an alt army, maybe try to have a few mages with you so you can really try as soon as possible to unlock these different patterns and to start crafting all these different bags, because all of them are going to be really, really interesting. Next to that, of course, you have the normal bags that can also be really good. For instance, this one 38 slot bag. As you can imagine, a lot of people are going to buy them because they're way better than the ones we have now. And so most likely, if you are amongst the first two people to unlock these, you will make a lot of gold. So next to that, of course, we have the different PvP gear, which is pretty good as well. We have all the different spell thread and we have all these other profession equipment. So here, nothing really changes. Then we have, of course, the different finishing and optional regents. We have the different garments. So again, here, nothing different than with Dragonflight. The only other thing I really want to insist on are the different bolts, and especially the ones that are on a daily cooldown or that have a cooldown. Again, if you are having an alt army and you have multiple mages, you will be able to make a lot of gold with these different bolts because again, you cannot craft tons of them on the same character. So in terms of specializations here, I would recommend you first to maybe consider unlocking from dawn until dusk because you will be able to unlock all the different daily bolts from this specific specialization. Next to that, you also have the quality fabric that can be really interesting. So here, for instance, if you are trying to make a lot of gold with the different bags and this type of things, then I would probably recommend you to get the resourcefulness one and maybe also the multi-craft that can be very interesting. Then in terms of maybe considering something different, so here in textile treasures, you can, as you can see, unlock this trait right here that will allow you to basically get more of the different weather cloth bolts and these different cloth from all the different humanoids. And so this is something that is really good if you are considering doing some hyperspawn farms. And so definitely something that you can consider. But then the one maybe that I wouldn't recommend you to spend too much time on is the Threads of Devotion. Again, it's really because I'm not a big fan of the crafting order system. And here it's mainly if you want to be able to craft these different pieces of gear with a very, very good quality and at a lower cost. Again, it might become profitable, but you will need to spend a lot of time on the crafting order system and it is pretty specific. So it's up to you. But in my opinion, from dawn until dusk is probably the priority, and then textile treasure and quality fabric could be good options as well. So for me, tailoring is definitely a good profession and something that will remain pretty good in the war within, and especially with the bags and everything, I'm going to put it as an A. After that, we have alchemy. So alchemy has always been a pretty good profession in order to make some gold, and it will still be the case in the war within. So here there's no major updates and most of the items are similar to the ones you were able to get and to craft in Dragonflight. But there are a few important things to mention. The first thing, of course, is if you are planning to do these different alt armies, this is probably going to be a really good profession because as you can see, you have a lot of different crafts that will require you to wait before being able to do another one. And so if you have a few of these characters available, you will most likely be able to make a lot of gold by doing all these crafts on all your different alchemists every day. So this is the first important thing that I want to mention. Next to that, you have, of course, the new potion and flask cauldrons that can be pretty interesting. Then you have all the different flasks and potions. So again, here, nothing crazy to mention. Some of these are going to be really good. You will be able most likely to make some gold, especially at the start of the expansion with some of them. But as these are all things that will be region-wide, very, very fast after that, these will become a little bit cheaper and maybe not as expensive. So still, I think Alchemy is going to be pretty similar and as profitable as in Dragonflight, and something that you should definitely consider if you are planning to have multiple alts and to make some gold with all these different alts. So for alchemy, again, if your strategy is to have an alt army and to do these daily crafts and everything, I would recommend you to go and take transmutation because it's going to be definitely something that will help you make even more gold with all your different characters. Then you have also all these other ones right here. So as part of the thaumaturgy that will be useful for you to unlock. And so this is really what I would recommend you to prioritize if again, this is the way you are planning to make some gold with alchemy. And another thing that you can consider doing very early on if you are not going towards transmutation and everything is taking alchemical mastery, because here, as you can see, by unlocking all these different specializations, you will be able to get new recipes when using different type of herbs. So probably in order to unlock all the different recipes as fast as possible and then start selling all the crafted items, you might want to also prioritize alchemical mastery. So again, here I do think that alchemy is going to be as interesting as in Dragonflight, and so I will put it as a high B simply because again, most of these different things are region wide, and so even though it can be very profitable, it's still going to be a little bit difficult maybe throughout the expansion to make this profession relevant and profitable, but it is still something very interesting to consider, especially if you're planning to build an alt army. So now we have three remaining professions. So first we have archaeology. Obviously archaeology, you're not going to make any gold with it. Then we have cooking. Cooking, in my opinion, is something you can make some gold with. And so I will put it as a C. But again, this is region wide and not something, in my opinion, that will really reward you with tons and tons of gold. Still something that can be considered if you really are interested in cooking. And finally, we have fishing. And fishing, I will also probably put it right here before cooking, because fishing, you will still be able to make some gold, and especially similar to Dragonflight, you will be able, for instance, to fish some of the different Dark Moon cards and some other interesting items that you can then sell for a lot of gold. But still, it's definitely not as interesting as some of the other gathering professions. So that's my tier list right here. So as you can see, S tier, in my opinion, is going to be engineering because it's very, very complete, and especially because of all the upgrades that this profession got in the War Within. Then at A tier, we have Jewelcrafting, Enchanting, and Tailoring. I really think these professions are going to be strong throughout the expansion. Then we have Alchemy, Blacksmithing, and Leatherworking at B. Again, crafting professions that I think are good, but for some reasons, either it's too reliant on the crafting orders or too reliant on the region-wide auction house. These are not going to be as good as these other ones right here. And finally, at C tier, we have all the different gathering professions, including also inscription and cooking, and then archaeology at D, because you cannot really make any gold with archaeology. So let me know in the comments if you agree or not with this ranking. Of course, I'm sure there are many ways you can make some gold with all these professions. And so probably if you were doing it yourself, you would probably rank all these professions very differently. But at least that's how I see it and how I think you will be able to make a lot of gold with these professions in the War Within. I will be back very soon with more guides and more videos. And in the meantime, I wish you all a great day. Bye.